Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead, back here on Porch Time today. And guys, it has actually turned off kind of cool. It's in the 60s. That's always welcome. Still didn't get any rain. I mean, we had systems move through, and y'all heard us talk about it on our live stream. We got we didn't even get an eighth of an inch. I mean, so it rained maybe 10, 15 minutes. That was about it. But we're thankful for that. Hopefully the sugar cane got enough that it'll pull out and won't die before we have to cut it in a few weeks to make syrup. So we're blessed in that area. It's cloudy today, and guys, it's a blessing to be able to sit on the porch and enjoy the cool temperatures. And I've noticed a lot of y'all have made comments about how cool it is where you're at. Some of you about how abnormally cool where you're at, and how abnormally wet where you're at. So, guys, today, I told y'all on the live stream, lots of things are bothering me, and lots of things I'd love to talk about, and I'm just having to process them. I'm having to work my way through them, and today is going to be one of them. I want to talk about the poisoning of the land. What little reading I can do now, my eyes, I'm having a problem with one of my eyes. Looking at the internet too much has ruined one of my eyes. And so I can't do a lot of reading and looking at internet like I would like to. But what I've been able to do, I've come to the conclusion that our land has been poisoned, and this is nothing but, it's nothing new. Looking back at the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire, and the dynasty that it was, it crumbled. And there was actually famine, there was poisoning of land, there was all these things that took place back then that cost the loss. And I really didn't realize this, but there was millions upon millions of people that died from starvation during the Roman Empire. And it was a lack of food. Now, every dispensational time, dispensation, or the empires during those dispensations have their problems with food. And it's all basically about the solar minimums that's taking place. Now, I know a lot of y'all don't believe in it and all that, and I really was up in the air about it for a long time. But after looking at the solar minimums and how the sun and just the scientific research, I mean, basically, it's not that I'm trying to come up with this. There is research out there to back this up, and there's people out there that's putting it out there. That's good people. People that I'm in contact with that are, that really, I look at the global warming issue. I have people in that area, people in the grand solar minimum area. There's people in the area that I talk with. There's people with weather anomalies, weather modification. I'm talking to all these different kinds of people about lots of different things, looking at their literature. And there's a legitimate truth in all aspects of it. But today I want to focus on the poisoning of the land. And guys, this is not new. I've gone back and tried to look at as much as I could. Well, like I told you with my eyes, the United States Agricultural Department, guys, our land doesn't have the minerals and the nutrients that it once had. We talk about our forefathers the grandmothers and all could cook meals and how nutritionally dense they were. That's because the soil was nutritionally dense. Now, even though older than my dad was born in the early 1930s. My dad told me that they would literally farm a piece of ground until it quit producing. And then they would clear new ground by hand, and they would farm it till it quit producing. In other words, basically what my dad was telling me was they was just destroying the land by not putting anything back. They farmed it to death. Literally sucked all that the land had to offer out of it, and they would go to a new piece of property. Well, I guess back then the mentality was that there was so much land and so few people till you could do that. You could always just clear a new piece of land and use it. And back then they didn't bring in giant pieces of equipment and push all the topsoil off. I mean, they went in by hand and grubbing hose and horses and mules, and they burnt stumps out. They done stuff like that, and they just, Daddy told me that literally they plowed around the stumps till a lot of times the stumps would get so rotten that they could either pull them or they could burn them out. So they didn't destroy the land in that aspect by pushing the topsoil all off down into the holler somewhere when they cleared the land. As a matter of fact, when I had my land cleared here, I specified when the guy with the dozer came in after Hurricane Katrina that he push everything from the hollers up on tops of the hills. And yes, it left my place looking horrendous. The hollers were all clean, but there was giant trash piles on top of every hills that I had around here, and it stayed that way for 4 or 5 years as they rotted and bushes growed up in them, and I would take the tractor and I would try to scatter them around a little bit and move dirt around on tops of the hills until eventually they rotted down to a point that I could literally, I could push and clean the whole hilltops up, and I had a small pile, and then I just burn it, got it over with. Even today, I'm still gathering dirt from trash piles that was pushed up from Hurricane Katrina and spreading them on my gardens out here. The old rotten dirt, logs and stuff like that that's in it. And I still find a few pieces of wood and a few pieces of fat pine lighter in there that I get out. Guys, this is what we need to do to build our soil back. Is not every time we clear something up, we don't just burn it or haul it off or put it outside the road for the garbage people to pick up. Is to literally let it rot and go back to the soil. Because in the early days of agriculture, I'm almost say after World War II, some of my research showed that after World War II, that the United States Department of Agriculture began to use some of the herbicides that was used in the wars. Even in Vietnam, Korea, they had these herbicides that they used, defoliants that were used. And they had such large quantities of it stored and stocked up that they tried to figure out what they could do with it. And they figured out, the best of my research I could figure, and I could be a little off on this, but I think I'm pretty accurate. They took a couple of the compounds out of some of these chemicals, and they now use them in, they began to use them in agriculture for weed control and stuff like that. And guys, that's the beginning of the poisoning of our land. Now, it's true, I've done a little search into Roundup and stuff like that. Roundup, you can go out here, and there's lots of controversy about this. There's lawsuits out in California. There's lawsuits everywhere about Monsanto being sued over Roundup, and cases are being won. And I'm not interested in that right now. But there's evidence out there that you can actually spray Roundup on the ground out there. And once Roundup is on the ground, you can, in 3 to 4 days, you can go back and replant right behind it a vegetable garden and it'll grow. Now, there's those people out there that says, oh, it's going to take up to 2 years before you can grow something there. That's not true, because guys, they sprayed my place here a few years ago. The power company came through, and I hit the ceiling. I had the whole company. I had to hire people in the company out here even, because my garden was next to a power line. They sprayed and killed the corner of it. And guys, I planted. That was in midsummer, and when it come fall, I replanted my garden just to see what would happen, and it came right back up. I mean, it didn't hurt it. And I'm not trying to say that it's good, that it's a good practice, okay? I'm trying to say that a lot of the information out there is not true information where they say you got to wait years before you can plant behind things like Roundup. That's just not true. As a matter of fact, there's a video channel out there that has some information. Hall's Tool has a video up. Travis and Greg talking about that, and I was really glad they brought that out. But if you continually put Roundup on your property year after year after year, and the rain settles it down in the soil, there is evidence to say that it goes down to the bedrock and it begins to build and comes back toward the top every year, poisoning the soil, so that after a certain point of time, you can no longer plant in that soil unless you use a Roundup ready seed in that soil. Now, that is a proven fact. Guys, it's been a conspiracy, you call it whatever you want to call it. It's been a plot, a plan, or whatever for years in this country for farmers to plant their lands using Roundup ready seeds. And guys, Big Ag has been sitting back with big corporations sitting back. And when these farmers can no longer afford to purchase the seed from these big companies, well, the Roundup ready seeds to put on their property, and their property begins to fail, and they can no longer pay for their bills and their property, then these big corporations are sitting back waiting to purchase this farmland. Now, I'm not a tinfoil hat kind of person, but I do believe there is a plan to eventually take over the farmland in America. I do believe that. I believe there's been a plan all the way back into the 70s when they came through the area out here where I live, and they paid the dairy farmers not to plant. Not to produce milk anymore. They subsidized them. Said, we will pay you not to produce milk, so that they could control the price of it. And we've talked about that on other videos. But guys, it's all a big plan coming together about being able to control the food in a nation. Because if you can control the food, you can control the population. And the sad part about it is today, the people that's coming up today, and maybe even some of them under the sound of my voice here, doesn't even have the slightest clue about the connection of food and land. Guys, you go to a restaurant and just watch how many people pile into these restaurants and they sit down and eat, and they have no clue about the connection of the food and the land. All they know is, I give you money, you give me food, I eat, I'm happy, and I go my merry way. They never take one thought about the land and what's happening to the land. The people that's taking note about what's happening to the land are the people like you and me who's sitting here trying to raise our food. We realize how depleted our land is of all the nutrients that's in it, and how hard it is with the kind of weather we're having to actually even produce anything. If it's not bad enough that we have land that's being poisoned, it's the weather. They're controlling the weather to a point where it makes it even more difficult. And then we've got a solar minimum taking place. I had to wait to do porch time this morning. Literally, it is now 10:23 in the morning. I had to wait to shoot this video because behind me back here, we have 7,000 acres behind me that's owned by a corporation. There's been a helicopter back there for the last 2 or 3 days. I did not really know what he was doing. I knew he was either spraying or he was fertilizing, because I've seen him in the past do it back here when they clear cut it. This morning, Wanda and I was out working in one of our beds, and the helicopter left where he was going and flew right over our house, and all he had was these big giant wands sticking out under it, like, I don't know, must have been 75 feet of wand underneath the bottom of that thing. And had spray nozzles on it. So they were probably spraying a herbicide of some sort back in there as a defoliant in those pine forests in there to kill somewhere they've probably done some clear cutting right here behind us. I haven't been back there and looked. They're probably they're poisoning the land. If you want to just be blunt about it, they're back there poisoning that land with some sort of a herbicide, more than likely. Now, that's what they've done before. When they clear cut right here behind me, they came right up to me probably 20 years ago after they clear cut it, and they let it lay for a year, and the weeds and the bushes and the trees that started coming up before they came in and chopped it, they came in here and sprayed it. I mean, right up to my fence row. And back then I didn't have gardens over here. This was just all woods. This was before Hurricane Katrina came in here. And I was adamantly watching today to see just how close that helicopter would get. I had a feeling in my heart that they were back there spraying, because he's too long. He's been back there too long. And I've watched them fertilize, and they have to make quick trips and come back with those big giant hoppers underneath it to fertilize. And I told Wanda, I said, they're spraying. I said, I know what's going on. And sure enough, I was right. I was waiting to see if they even come close to me here, if they were just spraying a defoliant in amongst the pine forest to kill any hardwoods or anything in there. So guys, they got pretty close to me this time. They're within 40 acres of me here, I'll say. And it's just sad. It's sad that for the almighty dollar, we're poisoning our land in this nation. And as a result, you can mark it down, and I don't know how long this video will ever be up. It may be up for a year. It may be up for the next 50 years. I don't know. But you can rest assured that at some point, if this video stands long enough, people still can find it and they will look at it. Those who hear my voice today will understand this. The poisoning of this land, whether it's my land, whether it's your land, or whether it's the land around you, will eventually result in famine in this country. There is going to come a day when, if it's not my kids or my grandkids, it will be their kids or their grandkids that will have no food, because the land will have been poisoned to the point where it will not produce anything anymore. You cannot continue to put stuff into the soil and expect to get something out of it when you continually destroy it. You can go back through history and you can study civilizations. China has some great records on that stuff. Japan even has records on it. You can see how dynasties rose and fell based on solar minimums, droughts, flooding, loss of food crops, starvation of people, all this stuff. It's there, folks. It's there for the finding, as long as the internet is made available to us and it's not censored to the point where we can't find it, which that is, I believe, is coming down the road too. But guys, if you poison the land long enough, famine and starvation is going to happen. And I will say this. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I've been trying to hold back from saying it. But I believe this with all my heart. I have talked to God. I have studied. I've done as much as I can do in prayer and everything else. And the Spirit has laid on my heart that this land has been cursed. And when I say this land, I am talking about the United States of America. Guys, when I talk about the poisoning of the land, I'm not only talking about using chemicals and herbicides and stuff like this that these big corporations are putting into the soils and into the rivers and stuff like that, and our waterways and things. I'm talking about the poisoning of the minds of people. I'm talking about the shaking of the fist of man in God's face and saying we will do whatever we want to do. Guys, you cannot do this. Throughout Scripture, God gives us literally incident after incident after incident, and He used His own people, the nation of Israel, as an example to us. Go back and look and study. Every time Israel fell, it shook its fist in God's face and said, I will serve other gods. I will do idolatry. I will do fornication. I will do this. I will do that. I will mix with the other people. I will do what I want to do. And God says, no, you won't. And he would either cause famine to happen, and there's famine, I mean, I forget how many times, it's like 20 times, or don't quote me on that, it's like 20-something times, or maybe more, that famine is mentioned in the Word of God, and it's mentioned in different lands. And guys, and people either had to move, or they died, or they just scrounged by. I mean, even you take the story of Naomi and Ruth in the Bible. Naomi and Ruth was in Bethlehem there, and the famine hit the land, and they had to move to the land of Moab, a land of idolatry and stuff like that. And they were there for, I forget, 10 years or something like that. And then they, you know, their husbands died, their sons died while they were there, and they both came back to Bethlehem when the famine had let up. You know, I mean, we're talking about famine for 10 years or better there in Bethlehem. Guys, there were still people there. It's just that there wasn't much. They could raise a little, but there wasn't enough quantity of food to feed everybody. And people, as a result, migrated. You can study throughout European history. The Year Without a Summer, 1815, somewhere around in that area. People migrated. People died by the millions because they couldn't get food. Even over here in the United States, people migrated over here when it got cold, and they couldn't raise any food up in the northern states. They migrated to the southern states. When the Dust Bowl hit the Midwest, people moved from the Midwest out to California and to the Washington State and Oregon and all those places out there where they could raise something to eat because of the dearth that had come upon the land. And guys, this is coming back as a result of this nation having shook its fist in God's face and said, we will do what we want to do. God is going to say, you know what? He's going to do just like they did in Saul's time when they said, we no longer want prophets, we want a king. And God said, if you want a king, then your children will become manservants, and your daughters will become maidservants, and you will serve a king, and you will pay for the king, and you will work for the king. And they didn't have to do any of this before, and they said, we don't care, we want a king. Well, guys, here a few years ago, we said we wanted change, and guess what? God gave us change. As a matter of fact, that was a campaign slogan. Change. It's up to you whether you believe it was for the better or for the worst. I'm not going to comment on that. But guys, let me tell you something. There's one thing that's fixing to happen, and that is change. There's change fixing to happen in this land like you've never seen before. I don't worry for myself. I worry for my kids. I worry for my grandkids. I worry for those that don't understand right now, that's got their head in the sand like the ostriches, and they don't believe anything. They believe everything is a fairy tale around them, and everything's going to keep going. Oh, this is a great land. This is America. We're too big to fail. God, we're not too big to fail. No one is too big to fail. Go back and look at every dynasty and every empire in the history of mankind. Every one of them has failed to date. And guys, it saddens me that there's so many people out here today that have their heads stuck in the sand, and they don't want to listen because they go, if I go to the grocery store, the grocery stores are stocked. You're just crazy. Well, let me tell you something. All it takes is for the prices of fuel to go through the roof. All it takes is for the 18-wheelers to quit running, to go on strike. And within 3 days, these words that I have spoken will come to fruition for you if you depend on a grocery store. Go to your grocery store. I challenge you to this day, because I've done it. Go to the grocery store. Talk to the manager. Talk to the produce guy who's stocking stuff in the back and ask him, how much stuff do you have stored in the back should a disaster happen? The best I've gotten so far is a week's worth. And if a disaster happens, maybe a couple of days worth, because everybody's going to run to the store and try to get all they can get. And when that happens, and you heard the old story having a run on a bank where everybody tries to get all their money out of the bank if they fear a collapse is coming, there'll be a run on grocery stores. And people will flood to the grocery stores. They will be trying to get everything they can get. And they'll be bringing stuff that they have in the back out, and it won't last but a couple of days. And guys, get this. If you read the book, and I'm talking about the Bible, it is told over and over and over in there that there will be a shortage of food in the last days. Now, I'm not saying it is the end of time. I'm saying it is the end of an age. There will be a shortage of food. It speaks about the price that you will have to pay, a day's wages, just to buy enough food to eat. Guys, it talks about they will throw their silver and their gold into the streets and curse it because they cannot eat it. There is no food to buy with it. All these people who keep talking about, oh, you better stock up on gold, you better get silver, the currency, the American dollar, it's the petrodollar, it could collapse at any moment, you better get you some gold and you better get you some silver. Well, evidently, people's going to take that advice because the Bible says in the last days of an age that they will throw that gold and silver that they have so preciously stocked up rather than food into the streets, and they will curse it. Guys, we're not far from that. And like I mentioned a while ago, however long this video stands up throughout time, at some point, if it makes it, and this nation collapses and this video is still up, somebody will come back and find it, and they'll go, wow, if people had only listened. That generation had it so good. Why did they throw it all away? Why did they poison the land? Why did they shake their fists in God's face? Why did y'all do this to us? Because it is our future kids and our future grandkids that will look back one day and they will curse us for what we have done. That's sobering. That is a sobering thought to think that our own family in the future, if we don't change something now, will curse us. Well, as a matter of fact, it's not going to do any good. They will curse us. Because God has shown me that He's lifted His hand off this land. That America will never again be blessed. America will never again cease to be the power that she once was. She's on a decline. And it will only spiral downhill from here. It's kind of like a snowball when you push it off top of a hill. The further it goes, the bigger it gets and the faster it rolls. Guys, I'm not trying to throw scare tactics out there. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger. I'm just stating facts that I believe that the Spirit has laid on my heart, that we don't have a lot of time to prepare to do the best we can do. And guys, I'd rather go out knowing I've done the best I could do and loving my God than I had to throw all caution to the wind and say, oh, these people are nutcases. Guys, I can't do that. I can't sit back and hold this stuff in my heart and not tell you guys to please prepare now. The time is short. I want to hear from y'all. I want y'all to put comments down below. I want to hear how you're preparing. I want to know that I want to know what you're doing. Because, guys, we're not perfect. There may be areas where we're slacking in and we can't figure it out, and you may have the perfect solution. That's why this community is so important, is that while our land is being poisoned not only with chemicals, but our minds are being poisoned. Our kids' minds are being poisoned. Technology is poisoning our minds. Guys, we're shaking our fists in God's face. We're saying, we don't need you. We can take care of ourselves. The day is coming, in the very not so distant future, where this is all going to come to fruition. And guys, only those who have prepared will be the ones who will survive. And I know, yes, I know you will make the comment, go ahead and prepare. The government's just going to come take it, or some warlord's going to come shoot you and kill you and take your food. Maybe so. Maybe you're accurate. But you know what? I'd rather take that chance than to sit back and do nothing and be ignorant and pretend that nothing ever happened and then be caught unaware. Because the Bible, you know, if you study the Bible, it has a lot to say about things like that. You know, it says the simple pass on and are destroyed. But a wise man or a prudent man sees the destruction coming, and yet he makes provisions for it. All that stuff's there in the book. All you got to do is look for it and find it. Guys, I love you. That's why I do these videos. I try to encourage you. I try to open your eyes to what's going on around you. Guys, pay attention to the land around you. The United States of America has not only been poisoned with chemicals and genetically modified foods and stuff like this, but the minds of the people have been poisoned. And when you poison the minds of people, there is a way unto man that seemeth right, but the end thereof is destruction. Guys, I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you, guys, from Deep South Homestead.